Well, while they're getting it up anyways, I can tell you that my name's Keli Hendricks, and I'm the Ranching with Wildlife Coordinator for Project Coyote. And my husband and I are cattle ranchers, and we run about 300 head of mother cows, and we've calved out thousands of calves around coyotes and mountain lions and other predators without the use of lethal controls. So I'm also a wildlife rehabilitator, so I'm a strong believer that we can create environments where the wildlife benefits from the presence of livestock and livestock benefits from the presence of the wildlife. So let me go back. It started in the middle for some reason. Oh, there we go. So I have to show that picture because I took it and I just love it. But anyway, so why do we want to consider non-lethal tools? Well, one of the really big things about non-lethal tools is they're proactive. So they prevent losses before they occur, which is a pretty big benefit. Whereas a lot of lethal controls they're reactive. So you've already lost the livestock before you start using them. And generally, non-lethal tools are better for the environment. Poisons, snares, and traps, they can all have a big effect on non-target species, even domestic pets and endangered species and things like that. And times are changing, so as ranchers, we really need to change with them. And there's less public tolerance for the use of lethal controls. And people are starting to understand how important these animals are on the landscape. So the things to remember that are important is, as you heard before by Becky Weed and some of the other people that spoke in Camilla's presentation, is there's no magic bullet. There's no one thing that you can do. There's an old saying in the ranching world that if you're going to have livestock, you're going to have dead stock. So you're going to lose some animals no matter what you do. And you have to have some amount of tolerance for that. And each operation has unique challenges. So what works at one place might not work for your ranch, so you have to be flexible, as we heard before, because you're going to have different challenges based on your terrain, your predator load, and the type of livestock you're raising. So keeping the big picture in mind is important. I spoke about some of the consequences of lethal controls can be really impactful, and you want to know before you use them what those can be. We now know that some of these predators can prevent a lot of the spread of diseases to ungulate populations, like chronic wasting disease. They can even help prevent some of the diseases that might affect people, like they can help lower the incidence of Lyme disease and rabies. So, and studies have shown that just a few dozen, or several dozen jackrabbits can consume as much forage as half dozen sheep or one cow. So that's really important to keep in mind. These predators can also keep our ranch lands healthier. And a lot of people don't know about this, which just blows my mind, because in the late 1920s, there was an incident called the Great Mouse Invasion, and it took place in Kern County, California. And what had happened was the government had come in and just removed all the predators, just wiped them out. You've heard about it? I can't even find anybody that's ever heard about this. They removed the raptors, all the predators on the land, just cleared it out. And what happened was, this is a huge farming area, and they had a major infestation of mice. So many that it was the greatest rodent infestation in US history. So these were in homes, they even consumed livestock in the pens, and it was just a mess. So before we go removing predators, we have to think about all the consequences that those actions can have. So, and you heard Dr. Bob Crabtree in Camilla's presentation talk about the effect that lethal controls have on coyotes. So you could start out with this, which is a normal litter of coyotes, maybe 6 pups, of which maybe 2 or 3 will make it to adulthood. And then you subject that population to lethal controls, and you can end up with this. So, which is a huge litter of pups in which more of them will survive. So it's just important to know about how these animals react to these. So I'm not going to spend a lot of time on fencing, because we could have a whole week's workshop just on fencing. So I'm just going to touch over some of the more popular fencing choices that people make. The old saying, good fences make good neighbors. That's especially true when it comes to predators. Good fencing is your first line of defense from predators, and a good fence will increase the effectiveness of your other non-lethal tools. So these are just some of the popular choices: woven wire, high tensile electric fencing, portable electric netting, or a combination of some. So one of the best investments you'll make if you're whether you're starting from scratch or you're trying to figure out ways to make better use of your existing fencing is to talk to a good fence contractor or a good fencing company. It's well worth the money because you can make a lot of bad choices. So there are some cool little products for small areas that are incredibly effective. This is Mountain Lion Foundation has this plans for this on their website, which is a mountain lion proof night pen for a small amount of livestock. I think it can be built for like $800 or something. So, you know, in California, we are losing almost more mountain lions to goat predation on just backyard hobbyists and 4-H kids and stuff like that. So these pens can be a great solution for things like that and prevent the mountain lions from being taken. And this one is Coyote roller. They're used for yards and things like that, but could also be used on night pens. When coyotes jump over a fence, say it's 5 foot or higher, they don't just really jump over the whole fence. What they do is they touch it with their paws and push off with their back paws as they're jumping. Sometimes it can happen so fast you don't even see it. This picture right here is very obvious what the coyote's doing, but sometimes it happens very quickly. But this is just a roll bar, so when they touch it with their paws, they fall back over. And you can make homemade ones out of PVC pipe for pretty cheap. And they are really, really effective. They also can keep dogs in yards and cats in yards too. So it's a neat product. And along those lines, this product, Dig Defense, is amazing. So it's just pre-cut sections of galvanized metal rods, and you can just hammer them right into the ground in spots where predators can dig under. It's actually cheaper to use than burying like hardware cloth or something. So it's actually a good choice for large expanses. And in fact, this product's often used around airports and things like that. And this new product back here, Hi Zap. I just now finding out about that. So there's a lot of exciting new products. So guardian animals. Over 90% of ranchers that have been polled say that they find these an economic benefit, having a guardian animal. So these are the popular ones, and I'll talk a little bit about the advantages and disadvantages of each. So dogs, the disadvantages are they have a relatively short life when compared to llamas and donkeys, and they require training. So you're not going to find very often an adult dog that's ready to go that you can just buy and put out with your flock. You have to train them and raise them. They require special food, and they will bark. So if you have neighbors, that could be a problem. A lot of people feel they're more effective against large predators and more effective in hilly terrain and things like that. Llamas and donkeys have a really long life, which is a good point about them. They don't require any training. Lions may kill them, but they don't take any special food, and they can be less effective in hilly terrain, some people think. And some people feel they work better alone, but like you'll see in the video that's coming up, some people use multiple animals together. The thought being, generally the people that think it doesn't work is when you put a couple of llamas out together with a flock, the llamas will stick to each other and not care about the flock. But there are people that claim otherwise. So the good thing about llamas and donkeys, if you get one, most places will offer you a 30-day trial period so you can make sure that the animal will work. So here's just a short video talking about guardian animals.
So is there any way to manage coyotes? Some people, like sheep farmer Maggie Juleson, believe they found a natural technique.
The old-fashioned way of controlling coyotes is with a gun. But I believe a lot of ranchers and stewards of the land are changing at this point.
And they're doing it by putting guard animals such as burros or donkeys, dogs and llamas in their flocks.
All the different guard animals do different things. The burros, the male burro has a tendency to chase away the coyotes. The female burro pretty much stays within the herd. Then my llama, the llamas just don't like dog-like animals.
An unguarded flock of sheep is defenseless. But aggressive guard animals can protect it. The coyote is harassed until it is confused and eventually looks elsewhere for a more predictable meal.
With all of them up here, I feel fairly safe, and for me, it's the most logical thing to do is to have the guard animals. It's much more efficient than government trapping or anything because they're always here, and they do what they do naturally.
Okay, so here are some less traditional guard animals. Don't know if you want to try them or not, but someone sent this to me from their trail camera. Does a pretty good job, I have to say. And here's some more, even less traditional ones than that. I never get anything that exciting on my trail cameras. I don't know why. So you heard a little bit about Foxlights in oh, hi puppy, in Camilla's presentation. And what it is, it's a new product that it's been around for a few years, but it was created in Australia, and it mimics the look of a person patrolling the fields in with a flashlight. And they're being used across the globe from everywhere, from everything to protect livestock and crops from things like snow leopards to elephants. So they have a dusk till dawn sensor, and they come in battery and solar models. They're very bright, though. They can be seen for like up to a mile away. So if you have neighbors, it might not be a good spot for a Foxlight because people will probably think the cops are coming every single night. The light it uses are random flashes of light, so it's harder for predators to habituate to than some of the other products that you've seen which just have a constant source of light. You want to use them thoughtfully, though. You don't want to just throw them out in a field and leave them out all year because they can habituate to them after time. But to use during times like lambing season, things like that, they're an awesome tool. And we did some testing on them in Marin and Sonoma County a couple years ago, I guess. And all the ranchers that we used them on their properties ended up buying them at the end of the testing, and none of them lost lambs that season. One of them told me once that he called me, he said, I think I lost a couple of lambs. So we put up trail cameras on the ranches where we did the testing, and when I reviewed the footage, the lambs had gotten out of the pasture under a hole in the fence. And so no predators came through the fence where the Foxlights were, but the lambs actually got out. So it's good to have those trail cameras to kind of absolve the coyotes of at least the guiltiness of going in to take them. Whether they got them once the lambs started roaming outside is anybody's guess. So the e-shepherd collar is another really neat idea. It's just now, I think within the last year or two, got some in the United States, but there's not very many of them out here. I'm excited to do some more testing of them. They were developed in Africa and being used in Africa, and they disrupted attack with a strobe light and an alarm. An alarm is like an ultrasonic alarm. So one collar protects like a dozen sheep. Hopland, which is a UC extension property, they do a lot of, it's 5,000 acres, they raise sheep out there. They use some successfully on their rams. Every year they're losing about 5 or 6 rams to predators, and they started using the e-shepherd collars, and they didn't lose any ram. Well, they lost one ram during the testing, but it was a ram that never herded, never stayed with the rest of the herd. So an animal without the collar and not staying next to the other animals with the collar is virtually unprotected, but they were really interested in them after using them like that. They were going to use them on the regular sheep, you know, with their sheep, with their ewes and lamb, but they found that the collars disturbed their livestock guardian dogs. That ultrasonic alarm bothered them, but the manufacturer says they use them with guard dogs all the time there in Africa, and it doesn't seem to bother them. I think it's more of a thing where you have to get the dog used to it. So, but it's a neat, exciting new product. Poultry, I just want to cover this quickly. Everything eats chickens. Everything loves chickens, from birds of prey to snakes to weasels to raccoons. If you don't have a predator-proof chicken coop, you will lose chickens. That's just the cold hard facts. It always sounds like a great idea. I want to get chickens and have my own eggs and stuff if you're a smaller type of, you know, hobby farmers. But what happens is they don't take into account the fact that I have found no greater rodent attractant than chicken coops. So if you have to think about that. You're going to have tons of rodents if you get them. Chickens can attack other chickens. It's not uncommon. They take a lot of vet care. But the predator-proof coop is the main thing. It's pretty much a must if you're going to raise them. And I think Camilla talked about Anatolian Shepherds being used a lot, or more commonly with poultry, but the white dogs can be good guardians too. You just never know. You have to try a dog with them to find out. So this is an important topic because a lot of times you know, people will see a predator eating on a dead animal in their pastures and assume that it killed that animal. But you need to know the difference between whether the animal died a natural death and was scavenged on, or whether it was actually killed. So there are some ways to do that. But you have to evaluate a fresh carcass. And when you have a fresh carcass and you want to tell whether it was killed by an animal or whether it died, you can look at the area around it. If the ground's relatively undisturbed, it's more likely that it just died of natural causes. The herd around will be relaxed, whether a lot of times if the herd had just suffered a predation amongst it, it'll be more nervous. There'll be a lack of blood at the scene. So even if it's being scavenged on, they're not going to bleed after death. So if the scene is unbloody, that's probably an animal that died of natural causes. And in stillborns, you can see a membrane on their hooves, and if you cut them open, there'll be no milk in the stomach. So that's a good way to identify that. And okay, so dogs, we were talking about that a little bit. Dog scenes are pretty easy to identify because they will be very, very messy. This is a picture of a dog that attacked a flock and was shot, but you can see the scene is really chaotic. They can attack day or nighttime. Multiple animals are generally attacked and not eaten, and the livestock will be very stressed. So these are just other scenes of, a lot of times they like to just pull off ears and things like that. It'll just look really random, the wounds. So lions have a tendency to drag off their prey and bury them. They'll come back to feed. And in a small corral, if you have a night pen that's not lion-proof, the animal may kill multiple animals in that pen. A lot of people think that's killing for fun, evidence that they kill for fun, when in fact what happens is they kill one animal and the rest of the animals are running around like this, and it re-incites their prey drive over and over again. So lions also, if you can see right here, let's see if I can figure out how to use it. See those puncture wounds? Those are very lion-esque. Large puncture wounds, and they often crush the windpipe. So coyotes, like everything else about coyotes, can be a little tricky. Their kills can look different ways, but they usually kill pretty efficiently. They usually consume their prey. A single animal is usually just attacked, and their daytime attacks are less likely. This calf right here was one of our calves that was attacked by a coyote. And this is a good example of how husbandry can be a big preventive of attacks, because what this calf had a mom that was a first calf heifer, which usually we bring in closer to the barn and everything, these first calf heifers, because they have a tendency not to be as good of moms as more experienced cows. So that was our mistake here, and this is what it cost us. The calf was fine, by the way, but and when my husband came up on the scene, he did shoot over the coyote's head. The good thing about this is now we have a trained coyote versus a dead coyote can't learn. So this, by the way, I just want to point this out, whenever online you see pictures of coyotes attacking sheep and things like that, almost all of these were taken at the Hopland Research Center on captive coyote studies they did. I've never really come across a picture online that showed a coyote in the process of attacking livestock that was not taken at Hopland. I'm sure some exist somewhere, but it's just an FYI, because they're never identified as this is a captive coyote on a testing thing with sheep, and the sheep are put in with this coyote. They always just make it look like, you know, they happen to run upon that scene. Okay, so in the recent fires in California, unfortunately our ranch was hit. We lost a couple hundred acres. But one of the interesting things that I found from this hillside was generally covered in tall grass. And when this all burnt, I'm like, oh, there's coyote den right there. What's interesting about that is this is where we keep our bummer calves. So, you know, the cows that have been orphaned, we always keep here, and we bottle feed them and stuff, and they can come in this little area right here. Coyotes pass through here all the time, but and they've never bothered the bummer calves, but the fact that their front door is looking right at the bummer calf pen, I thought was kind of interesting. So it goes to show you that just because coyotes are around doesn't mean they're attacking or going to attack your animals. And this little sweetheart right here is my pig Odessa, and she was trying to fit into, she likes to go on hikes with me, so she was trying to fit into the coyote den, of which she's a little bit too big. So this is kind of a fascinating thing that I learned. I went to the Vertebrate Pest Conference in California a couple weeks ago, and they did a survey on about 100 California ranchers in Northern California, and it turns out, look at this. Okay, so they're talking about percent of animals that were lost by different causes of sheep. So we got coyotes. So 15% of their total losses were from coyotes. Now look at this, human predators, meaning theft, 21% of the total losses were from human predators. So this is the only time that I know of in a study that that particular stat has been illuminated like that. So it just makes you wonder nationally, I mean, are human predators on a national level taking more lambs than coyotes? I don't know, it's something to think about.
What was the 48%?
Let me see. 48%, oh, that's from diseases and natural causes, which is always by far the biggest killer of livestock.
And where was that?
That was in Northern California.
And Kelly, can you say how many people he surveyed, or was it quite?
It was 100 ranchers, around 100.
Yeah. So,
you know, it's just an interesting statistic, I think. So here's some other tools in the toolbox. And husbandry, with being the first couple, pasture selection can be very important. You don't want to put your vulnerable, I think Becky talked about this, you don't want to put your vulnerable animals in a pasture where there's a lot of natural cover around it and things like that, where predators can hide. So it's interesting to think about things like that before you put animals out. Removing attractants can be important. You don't want to leave animals that are dead just out there to attract predators. And human presence, Becky talked about how important that is. But these scare devices, when you're creative and kind of just think about things you don't often think about, you can come up with some pretty good ideas. This is Northeast Oregon, where they use this to protect some alpacas. And here's a little video. Let's see if this will work. It's those squiggly men that they have in front of car dealerships. This little girl's playing with it. But they're like a couple $100, and they light up at night. So, I mean, there's not going to be a coyote in the world that's going to approach when that thing starts flapping around. So that's a creative way. Of course, that requires a power source. So, you know, it's going to have only be useful for places where you have your livestock next to a power source. But it's a good idea. Now, this one, on the other hand, is battery operated, motion censored. Oh, it's switching. I don't know why it's playing like this, but I got it for like 20 bucks. So it's pretty scary.
Are the sheep afraid of it?
Yeah, no, they get used to it, but it'll scare the hell out of any predators, that's for sure. And so you can be creative and come up with these ideas. A lot of times in places like if you've got a fence that's, temporarily broke down or too low or something, you could just tie a helium balloon there. For that. That's going to repel. Coyotes are very neophobic. They don't like new things in the environment. So it gives you a little time to work on getting something like that fixed. So, and I'm just going to end with this quote. It says, "Peace is not the absence of conflict, it's the ability to handle conflict by peaceful means." And that's by Ronald Reagan. And this is a story that just happened in San Francisco. A newspaper delivery man was delivering papers, and they kept disappearing, and his customers were complaining. So finally he saw a coyote one day out with one of the papers playing with it in the hills, and he realized that the coyote was stealing them. So every day he just started throwing a newspaper to the coyote, and the problem stopped. So it's just an interesting, there are other ways to solve conflict sometimes than the first ones we go to. So, all right, well, should I take questions now, or do you want to?
Sure, go ahead.
Do you guys have any more questions, or? Yeah.
So, Kelly, you manage calf-cow operations. Do you have much issues with coyotes, or you have mountain lion issues more, or?
We don't have very many problems with any of them because we do a lot of proactive things. We do a lot of human presence around our livestock, which has another added benefit, is when you're out there around your animals a lot, you can find the sick ones and bring them in before they're, because they're going to be the first ones probably to go when a predator comes by. So it prevents a lot of loss that way. And I always say that sometimes predators, if you're a good rancher, predators can actually benefit your ranching in the sense that it makes you be out there around your animals and catch the sick ones. As we see, health reasons are one of the main killers of livestock. So if you can be out there and prevent some of those deaths by seeing those animals early enough to bring them in, sometimes that's a bigger bonus. Without the sense of predators being out there, no one's going to go out and check their animals. Why would you, So, anybody else?
What about lights? Now, floodlights are pretty cheap, LEDs. And we shine lights down a few paddocks where we lock the sheep in.
Yeah, that's excellent for night pens and stuff like that when you're bringing them at night. That's always a really good idea. I believe in that strongly, yeah, you can do that. Anybody else? Yeah.
I just have a general question about vulnerability of adult cows, and we're talking about cattle breeds, beef cattle breeds, I'm assuming. How vulnerable are they to depredation?
I'm glad you asked that, because this just is a thorn in my side that I hear all the time. It's some kind of ranching myth that keeps getting spread from rancher to rancher. And maybe there's an instance where this actually happens, but I guarantee you it does not happen on the level that ranchers claim it does, or some ranchers claim it does. And that is, they always say, anytime you hear these wild stories about predations, it's always, and the coyotes were eating the calf out of the cow while she was calving, and they ate that live and then ate the cow. We've calved out thousands and thousands. I've never seen, first of all, cows can get up when they're calving. It's, it doesn't paralyze them. Second of all, I don't know what kind of cows these people are raising that happens, but we've never had anything like that happen. Cows are really capable of defending themselves against coyotes and defending their calves. In fact, what our cows do is, it's pretty interesting really, is the cows will leave their small calves with babysitters while they go out and graze. And they switch, so there's somebody always with the cows. So I've never seen, maybe there is some sort of breed of cow that's so docile that'll just lay there while coyotes are eating the calf out of them, but I've never seen anything like that. But anybody else? Well, thank you guys so much. I really appreciate it.